He's not pumped up. 40,000 on their feet. 2-2 pitch. The A's win the West. The Oakland A's, 54-108 was their record 2 years ago, winning the West, sweep the Royals in 3-4.
For as long as I live, whenever I hear the song Celebration by Kool and the Gang, I will think about the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. Welcome to Crafting the Call, a special edition as we salute and appreciate all the amazing memories of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. I'm Josh Suchon, voice of the Albuquerque Isotopes.
And I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, voice of the Lansing Lugnuts. And celebrate, Josh. This is going to be a celebration, but this is going to be bigger than you and me.
I just might cry, so I think I need to have some Kleenex around. But in order to properly say goodbye to the Oakland Coliseum, we wanted to bring in a third guest. His name is David Feldman. David Feldman went to a lot of Oakland A's games. That is an understatement to say that he went to a lot of Oakland A's games. David and I didn't know each other in the 80s, but we ended up sitting next to each other a lot on a regular basis. Dave took his love for baseball and the A's, and he worked it into his career. He started as a statistician for the Oakland A's. He has been a longtime producer. He's done pretty much everything you can do in a television broadcast. He is also an official scorer, and we welcome David Feldman, who is recording this week's episode with us from the Coliseum. Feldini, welcome.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Like Jesse said, a celebration, but it's almost like a living wake as we're coming down to the final Oakland A's games here at the Coliseum.
What did I leave out about your background so that people can properly know why we selected you, David?
Well, I it's true. I started out as a fan. My dad actually grew up in Philadelphia as a Philadelphia A's fan and moved the family here basically a month before the A's played their first game in the Coliseum. So I grew up at the Coliseum, first sitting in section 119, row 12, then going up to 217, and then finally into the bleachers. And that's where a whole community started. From there, lucky enough to start working in baseball. And I was thinking about this the other day. Besides the places that I lived, the place that I spent the most days of my life is the Oakland Coliseum. You're talking at least 80 days almost every year since really 1990. And then, even during COVID, we did 60 television games here at the Coliseum, home and road. I've spent more days here than anywhere. And it's just... it's my home away from home.
When you watch that first clip with us, what comes to mind?
So this is 1981. This is the strike year. And for me, I'm 14 years old. This was the season I was allowed to take Bart to night games for the first time. Now, you think about 14-year-olds going on Bart now, you think it's crazy, but it's going to games myself. So that was Billy Martin, right? This is in 80. It was the first year of Billy Ball, Rickey Henderson. And in 81, they start with 11 straight wins. It's a new ownership. It's the Haas ownership. They bring in Celebration is going to be their theme song. And we heard it a lot. The strike happens. It's devastating. 50 days, no baseball. They come back, win on a walk-off home run from Mike Heath, their first game back. We go to this split series with Kansas City, and they sweep them, and it was just joyous. And you heard Al Michaels' call, and I always reference Lon Simmons' call because his call was always, they're going to kill Dave Beard if they aren't careful. And it's just fantastic. And just that joy. And you saw the fans rushing the field, right? That was a Coliseum staple. If you see when the A's won in 73 and 74, the World Series here at the Coliseum, the fans are all over the place. It's nuts. So to bring that back in 81 when they're rushing the field, you just don't see that anymore. It's just special times.
All right, so we're going to go through a lot of the special times from the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum's history. We're going to go in chronological order, and we're going to start from some of the huge moments from the 3 straight World Series titles.
Fly ball to right field, hit pretty well, and there she goes. There's a long drive. Jackson has hit it all, and it is gone.
Okay, so that is the voice of Monty Moore, who was the longtime A's announcer on radio back then. One announcer from each team would join the national calls of games. And so this is going to be a blended episode because Crafting the Call is all about analyzing play-by-play announcing, but it's going to be hard for me to not get into all of the nostalgia of all of these things. And so, Dave, I want to start with you with Monty Moore and his call, There She Goes, and some of the first couple of clips that we just saw.
Yeah, so Monty was in an interesting position. All the local broadcasters were when they did this during the World Series. All of a sudden, you're a local broadcaster, but you're on the national network, right? So you have to play it a little more down the middle. Monty, who started with the A's in Kansas City, definitely a homer. He was an A's fan. Charlie Finley pushed for him to cheer for the A's on the air, and Monty would do that to a point. He wasn't as bad as the Harry Carey got to be, but he knew where his bread was buttered, and he was gonna root for the A's on the air. So he had to tone it down a little bit. But it's Game 7 of the World Series there. The A's had not homered in the World Series yet. They came back to Oakland down 3-2 to a Mets team that was undermanned, and Rusty Staub was injured. He's out there; he can't even throw. It was Willie Mays is on his last steps. It was amazing that they were even down 3-2 to that team. The Mets had a decision to make. They had Seaver and Matlack, Game 6 and 7 pitchers, but they could have saved Seaver for Game 7 on normal rest. Instead, they pitched him in Game 6. The A's beat him. Now you go with Matlack, the A's homer. Burt Campaneris hits the first A's homer, and then Reggie starting as Mr. October homers. I thought Monty kept it under control, though, on those calls, right? His normal home run call was going, gone. This one you hear the There She Goes, which he threw in there every once in a while. But that's a tough spot for a local broadcaster thrown into a national spotlight.
Jesse, I'm curious for you as an outsider who did not grow up in the Bay Area, when you see those old images of the Coliseum and people waving the pennants, and you just see like all of the banners, which to me were always a big part of the Coliseum, people creating banners. Like, what are some of the thoughts that you have seeing those initial clips?
So I feel what the fans feel. It is the easiest thing for me. You show me an atmosphere where everybody is electric, and I feel the same thing. And so I'm watching those, and I'm feeling the same kind of excitement.
All right, let's go to 1974. There's a lot of people in my family whose favorite player was Joe Rudy, and this next clip is going to be one of the major reasons why.
The A's have not scored since the second, and Ray Fosse homers. There's a long drive. Go! Boy, he hit it. No doubt about it when he left the bat. And an interesting part of the home run is during the delay of the game when the object was thrown in left field, Mike Marshall did not take one warm-up pitch. In fact, he walked out toward left field to get into the argument out there. He didn't take one warm-up pitch, and maybe that cost him.
So that is Kurt Gowdy, who's on the call there in the 1974 World Series. Dave, explain more about what got thrown on the field and why there was the delay and why Mike Marshall did not throw a warm-up toss.
Yeah, this is a great pickup by Kurt Gowdy. We're going to the bottom of the seventh. It's 2-2. Bill Buckner's playing left field for the Dodgers. That's the immortal Bill Buckner. you'll later hear about 1986 in the World Series. But Bill Buckner was no fan of the A's fans. And the fans were not fans of him because earlier in the series, he said maybe there's 2 or 3 A's that could start for the Dodgers. Maybe 2 or 3. This is an A's team that just won the back-to-back World Series titles, and they're in their third. Only 2 guys can start. So, and the A's fans, as they're wont to do, were throwing toilet paper out on the field. There were some bottles thrown out on the field, and a smoke bomb gets thrown out. So the smoke's billowing out, and now there's a delay. And now Mike Marshall is the Dodgers pitcher. Now, Mike Marshall was a very smart guy. He also, as a reliever, threw over 200 innings in a season, and he would win the 74 National League Cy Young. Think about that, a reliever throwing 200 innings. Very smart guy, but always in his head. As this is going on, he's actually out there talking to the umpires, and Joe Rudy is just on the on-deck circle. So finally, it's about a 5-minute delay. The smoke clears. Mike Marshall goes back to the mound, and Joe Rudy has talked about this. He figures, here's Mike Marshall, who's normally a screwball pitcher. He's going to throw me a fastball. He hasn't warmed up. He hasn't taken anything. He's going to let it go. Sure enough, fastball, inside, turned on it, gone. Turns out to be the game-winning home run. And now the 8th inning comes around. Bill Buckner leads off the 8th. And this was the play that actually the A's players from that era talk about, is that Buckner hits a ball to right center field that Bill North goes after, misses it. But Reggie Jackson is there backing up. Reggie picks it up, throws a perfect relay throw to Dick Green. Dick Green throws it to third to Sal Bando, and Buckner's a dead duck at third base, making the first out of the inning at third, right? A cardinal no-no. But it was perfect A's baseball. It was the fundamentals that Dick Williams drummed into them and continued even with Alvin Dark as our manager. It was just, that was the coronation of the A's, right? The 3 World Series championships, but this was game 5. They destroyed the Dodgers. This was the best A's team of the 3, in my opinion, because everybody was healthy in that World Series. 72, you didn't have Reggie. 73, you didn't have Bill North. You had everybody in 74. And it comes together in 5 games. Raleigh Fingers is the MVP, gets the last out. And again, the Coliseum explodes. And you saw the energy in that place. This place holds energy as well as any building, especially at that time. It's a wide open Coliseum with the Oakland Hills, where the energy stayed in the stadium.
Josh, if I could follow up on Curt Gowdy, and it's fun that this ties right back in with you asking me what I felt when I'm watching those fans. And now I'm watching the fireworks and I'm going, well, I really do want to be there. Gowdy has just mentioned that they have not scored since a home run. So when this home run is hit, I'm thinking he's going to tight back into this, that they had not scored since a home run. Now they've gone deep again. Here we go. And it's so interesting to me that he saw that Marshall had not warmed up. They did not talk about it beforehand, right? They did not set the stage for this plate appearance. The home run is hit. The fireworks go off. Gowdy is understated and professional, right? He mentions it. He lays back. Now as he comes in, and this is what he comes back with as a conversation starter. That's so fascinating to me to start to frame with, why did this just happen, and could this be part of the reason?
Yeah, Jesse, our last episode was about what do you do during commercial breaks, right? You get 60 seconds, I get 90 seconds. What are you doing during those commercial breaks? And sometimes you're updating your scorebook. Sometimes you're stretching. Sometimes you're watching the pitcher warm up. Did he throw one to the screen? How many balls did he throw when he was warming up? And will that impact? Is that a storyline if he walks the first batter? Is something starting to go on in his head? And so I think that as a broadcaster, you're constantly paying attention to things. You don't always use them. Sometimes you put it in your back pocket and you think, I just saw this. Maybe I'm going to say something. But in this case, it's the first pitch. So he stays out of the way of this, describes the home run. Now he pulls it out of his back pocket. He did not throw a warm-up during this lengthy delay. And now we can go on from this moment on to describing this. All right, let's skip ahead, because after 3 straight World Series became one in numerous times in which the Oakland A's were torn down, although their best players were traded or sold, not re-signed, and the A's went through some dark, dark times. They actually made the playoffs in 1975. 5 straight years they made the playoffs, but they lost in the American League Championship Series. Then came the extremely dark times, and that brings us to 1981, in which we started off this episode with, and we saw the A's clinching the division against the Royals. They then went on to play in the American League Championship Series against the Yankees. And spoiler alert, they got swept in 3 games. But something happened in Game 3 of that American League Championship Series that has forever changed what sports fans do at games. And we're going to listen in as Bill King and Lon Simmons watch this phenomenon and try to figure out what to call it.
October 15th, 1981. More than 47,000 fans of the Oakland A's say goodbye to an incredible season in a most incredible way. Once again, Lon, tonight is a perfect example of what the Oakland Coliseum has meant this year. Everybody having a great time out here.
This is the thing that is so important, I think. If the people have a good time and they don't get the rowdy things, that don't try to injure people or do things that create difficulties for the people that are alongside them that are trying to have a good time. Baseball's supposed to be a fun game, and you come out and have a good time, and the fans under the direction of Crazy George out here having themselves a good evening and enjoying baseball, enjoying the Coliseum and not hurting anybody.
Crescendo rising here. That's amazing. I've never seen anything like this. All this is happening as far as the vociferous aspect of the crowd, while nothing's going on in the field. Now the next question is just how inhibiting this will be, whatever it is.
Just how uninhibiting will the wave be, whatever it is? We hear Bill King saying vociferous at one point and the crescendo rising, but no one knows to call it the wave yet because that was the first wave.
I like that their first priority as they're looking around. Nobody's getting hurt.
Yeah.
Well, so this is actually a really good point. It's the start of the episode. We heard Al Michaels' call, and Dave referenced how Lon Simmons said that, you know, what was the line again that Lon Simmons said, Dave?
They're going to kill Beard if they aren't careful.
They're going to kill Dave Beard if they're not careful. So now here we go. That was the division series. This is the next round of the playoffs. And so this is still topical on the mind of Lon Simmons, right? That the fans are having a good time, but they're not going to kill Dave Beard or anybody else in the process of this moment at the Coliseum where they're doing the wave.
But, this is, again, the first year of the Haas ownership. And one of the things that they made a priority was the enjoyment of just coming to a game. They knew they couldn't control whether the A's won or lost that day, but they could control the atmosphere and the fan experience. And that was changing the PA system and having rock music and pop music playing during the ball game, which was the first stadium to do that. It was bringing in Crazy George as this cheerleader to get the fans going. Remember, as Josh mentioned, the dark times, in 1979, they lost 108 games. There's only 330,000 fans for the entire season. Fans weren't coming to these games. Well, now fans were coming back, and they were excited and bringing this music and Crazy George and teaching people what it's like to enjoy being at the ballpark. It's funny with Bill King. I mean, as he talks about the wave, Bill King came to despise the wave. Despise it enough that he actually had a sign made had an image of a wave with one of those red crosses on it, and he would wave it out of the broadcast booth when the wave would start. That's how much he despised it. But in 81, the first time seeing it was pretty miraculous, and he was enjoying it at that time.
This was 5 years before it took the world by storm, right, at the World Cup.
Well, it was actually 84 and the Tigers. They loved the wave at Tiger Stadium, and they went nuts for it. And then obviously the World Cup, and then it just took off. I remember being at the University of Maryland and seeing a slow motion wave at a football game, which to me was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And now the thing that always got me as being a fan, I don't know if you felt this, Josh, when you would see someone try and start the wave like a fan, you just sit down, watch the game. What are you doing? Drive me insane.
The quantity of times that I would see somebody come over, and usually they were shirtless, they had a beer in their hand, their sunglasses, and they just walked over to some section, and maybe it was like a bet or something. He's like, "Hey, everyone, we're going to start a wave. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go." And then no, sit down. No.
Throwing things at him.
I love that we're talking about the different phases, the different stages of the atmosphere at the Coliseum, though, right? You've got the banners and the fireworks, and now we're into the music and Crazy George and the wave, and you've got the different eras of the dominant A's team, and then you have here's what the stadium feel was like during this time.
Yeah, it's changed, right? And you think about the 80s, what we're getting into, and when the Bash Brothers, and what the Coliseum was always talked about as being the wine and cheese crowd in the 80s, right? Because Candlestick was the rough and tumble place. And then once the Giants got their new ballpark and the Coliseum went over to the Mount Davis side of things, then this was the hardworking place. And this is where the real fans came. Very much the atmosphere changed, and the way people looked at the Coliseum, they looked at the fans, definitely changed over the years.
I feel like a big part of the A's story as a fan of the A's was that you got really excited by these teams, and then you got your heart broken constantly over and over and over again, right? So we just looked at 1981, and the A's had the best outfield in baseball. They had Rickey Henderson, they had Dwayne Murphy, they had Tony Armas. They had these 5 aces that all threw complete games. They were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Billy Martin is on the cover of Time Magazine. But, of course, that can't last. And all of those guys got hurt, and then once again the A's started losing more and more. And we went to different managers. We went through another dark period. But there would always be these little glimmers where something would happen and you would think, okay, that's the guy. Okay, so that's going to be the next guy who's going to be the ace of the pitching staff. Or that's the guy that we can pair with Rickey Henderson, which then leads us to one of my kind of forgotten but favorite moments from the 1980s.
Everybody's up on their feet here. Well, Bob Force just pitched one in the last week in the National League. And we had one earlier in the American League on the 4th of July with Rickey. Here's the 1-2 pitch. Fly ball to left. That should do it. Henderson camps under it. Mike Warren, a no-hitter against the Western Division champion White Sox. The 22-year-old rookie from Garden Grove, California. In his first year, his last game. Oh, no-hit shutout for the Oakland A's, the 3rd no-hitter in the majors this year. And Kenny, you and I are both watching our first no-hitter tonight. I only wish it had gone the other way.
Wow. Well, you hate to see the White Sox lose, but the thrill of a no-hitter is one of the great thrills of a lifetime, even if it's against the team you're rooting for.
I guess you're right. I got goosebumps.
It's something. It's a very special feeling, and as so often seems to be the case, a no-hitter comes in the last week of the season. It's the 4th the Oakland A's have had in their history. Vita Blue involved in 2 of them. Catfish Hunter in the first Oakland no-hitter. And here's a young man who grew up in the shadow of Anaheim Stadium, who was in the minor leagues the first week of August, and now he's pitched a big league no-hitter. Mike Warren, and they are going crazy here at the Coliseum in Oakland. And I'll tell you, we're glad you're with us tonight because you'll never, ever forget watching a no-hitter.
Okay, so that is the Chicago White Sox broadcasting crew, obviously. The Oakland A's did not televise that game. And I'm not sure who the first announcer was. Maybe you guys can know the voice when they say Kenny. That's Ken Harrelson, who's talking second and does a really good summation of who Mike Warren is. He grew up in the shadows of Anaheim Stadium. He was in the minor leagues just a couple of months ago. How often there's no hitters in the final week of the season. I think it's a really good summation, or if you knew nothing about Mike Warren and you just watched this clip, you suddenly have a really good idea of what just happened.
Yeah, and you're listening to Hawk Harrelson, young Hawk Harrelson, where he's not so verbose and making all these big-time statements. And, oh, boy, he's actually enjoying the moment. And even though he says, yeah, I hate to see the White Sox lose, he was enjoying the moment, which is great because it's a special thing. And what you also notice is, and Josh, you kind of mimicked it, is Rickey with the snatch catch in left field, last out. And that was the first Rickey snatch catch. It was the first time he did it. And he does it on the last out of a no-hitter. Mike Warren had come up in August, had a terrible debut as a doubleheader against the White Sox. He came in. Greg Walker hit a 3-run double against him. He had a terrible 11th inning. You didn't think anything of this guy. And you saw how he threw even in the one pitch you saw. This was a typical early 80s pitcher, probably throwing maybe high 80s in nowadays miles per hour, but trying to get by with stuff. And he throws a no-hitter against the White Sox, and not just any White Sox team, the White Sox team that won the AL West and is going to the playoffs.
Yeah. They give the history. Here's the fourth no-hitter for the Oakland A's. Here's Mike Warren from Garden Grove, who grew up in the shadow of Anaheim. It's great for Mike personally, and it's great for the franchise. So, hey, Hawk, all right.
But again, that was also during kind of the dark ages when the A's went through Steve Boris ball, and they went through Jackie Moore, and briefly Jeff Newman was an interim manager. And then comes 1986, and Tony La Russa is hired as the A's manager. And then Jose Canseco is the Rookie of the Year. And then 1987, Mark McGwire is the Rookie of the Year. And then in 1988, Walt Weiss is the Rookie of the Year. And Sandy Alderson becomes the general manager, even though they didn't call him the general manager back then. And we didn't know it back then, but he was consulting with really smart people who were starting to look at baseball in a different way. And they started to acquire players based on base percentage and looking at different splits, even though it wasn't known yet. But that's why a lot of their trades were being made. And so now, once again, the A's are playing really baseball, and the Coliseum is once again rocking. Of course, 1988, the less we talk about 1988, the better. So then we go to 1989, and this was the one missing piece was Rickey Henderson, who was my all-time favorite player, and then he gets traded away, and that was my first reality of this is what sports are like. Your favorite player gets traded away, and now he comes back. So before we watch Rickey Henderson returning to the Coliseum, Dave, I want to get your just sense of what it meant at the time when Rickey Henderson came back and what the atmosphere was like for his first game back.
Well, I think we got to go back to the Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire, because you talked about after Billy Ball, the 83, 84, 85 season, the Coliseum, crowds weren't great. This was not an exciting team. Dave Kingman was the big selling point, but we kept hearing about Jose Canseco as this rookies and all these home runs, and he came up at the end of 1985. And as you can see in the photo behind Josh's right shoulder, you see how the Coliseum used to be. And you can see the ice plant in the outfield. And there was always rumors that people hit balls into the ice plant. Nobody ever hit a ball into the ice plant. I'm saying it right now. No one ever did. Reggie Jackson never did. People used to say Jim Rice did. No one ever did. You would have had to hit a ball about 550, 575 to get into the ice plant. It just never happened. However, Jose's first major league home run against Jeff Russell, his first at bat in the Coliseum, was a line drive just to the left of center field that one-hopped the back wall, which probably was about 485 on a line. So that's Jose. And then, he wins Rookie of the Year in 86. And then Mark McGwire comes in, and he's hitting all his bombs. And the Coliseum becomes the place to be. I remember being at a Saturday game against the Milwaukee Brewers, sitting in the bleachers, and there's 33,000 people. And I'm like, what is happening? Who are all these people? It was superstars, right? It's Canseco, it's McGwire, it's home runs. Then 88, you go to the World Series, you lose in an awful fashion. But this is the Coliseum, and this is how Dennis Eckersley, Dave Stewart. This is a rock and roll team, and you just needed that one guy. And that one guy was going to be Rickey Henderson. Homegrown. The A's had loved him when he was here the first time. Circumstances, they traded him. But now it was time to bring Rickey home. And everyone knew that was it. You put Rickey on this team with Carney Lansford, Dave Henderson, Dave Parker, Canseco, McGwire, Steinbach. Forget it. This offense was going to be complete. It was the missing piece. It changed everything bringing Rickey home.
I was at Rickey Henderson's first game back. I'm assuming you were too. What are your memories about just like the energy of what people thought about Rickey coming back?
It was electric. The only thing was that Rickey was wearing number 22, and that never felt right. Finally, Ron Hassey would trade him that number back or get a Rolex out of it. But just the buzz, right? Rickey was back. And, Rickey's time in New York, he had a great 1985 season in New York, scored 145 runs. Don Mattingly drove him in continually. But then he had some trouble with Lou Piniella in 87, and Lou thought Rickey was faking an injury. He called it jaking it. Rickey had a torn hamstring, and Lou Piniella is saying he's faking an injury. So it was time for Rickey to leave New York. And Josh, that night, it was a Monday night game. It was on Monday Night Baseball on ABC, and I just felt that the place was electric that night.
Gary Thorne and Joe Morgan were the announcers for ABC's Monday Night Baseball, and let's look back on some of the moments from Rickey's first game back.
And there he is, the subject of all kinds of attention. There was some question whether or not he would get here in time for the game number 1. The answer to that is obviously yes, as you see the Oakland fans responding. He did not get here in time to take batting practice. In fact, he walked of the dugout just in time to see the A's picking up the balls and heading off. He did take some swings off the tee. There's no question it's a very big deal. And now the question is how it's going to work out with that trade to the New York Yankees. And Joe Morgan, he certainly brings speed and excitement to Oakland again.
Well, I think that's the key. He brings a lot of excitement with him. Rickey Henderson on first base is one of the most exciting things that happens in a baseball game. He looked like the Pied Piper when he was coming out today. All these people were following behind him, just trying to get a question in and get a view of him. And I tell you what, he can excite a lot of people, and I think he'll do that for the Oakland A's, especially the top of the order. They needed that. And that's not the place to throw sinker balls.
So here is the man of the moment, Rickey Henderson, back in the Oakland uniform. Having been traded, of course, in '84 after being here with the Oakland A's when he couldn't come to a contract agreement, and now traded right back the other way for virtually the same reason. He couldn't strike a deal with the New York Yankees this time around, and so he's now back in the Oakland uniform. And Tony La Russa, as you heard, is very excited about it. As he playing him in the corner, right down to the 330 line. Henderson's going to score another run. They're waving him around. Relay to McGriff. McGriff's throw to the plate will not be in time, and Rickey's home in more ways than one.
As you said, Rickey Henderson scores runs, and a lot of guys would not have been able to score on that double down the right field line. Henderson lines it down the right field line, but Gruber makes a good play by going over and picking it up very quickly. He gets it to the relay man as Rickey rounds second. McGriff bobbles it, and that allows Rickey to score without a play. And there you see him doing what he does best, and that's score runs.
Rickey Henderson is back home in more ways than one. Great line by Gary Thorne.
Yeah, he killed it, Gary Thorne, that night. Now, the A's lose that game. That's what I remember. The A's lost because Snyder came in and gave up a 2-run homer to Fred McGriff. But here's a quick Rickey story from that night. So Rickey does get to the team late that day. They didn't know if he was going to show up. Shows up, goes into Tony La Russa's office. And basically, Tony wasn't sure what to expect. He had heard all the stories, didn't really know Rickey, and Rickey's being on his best behavior. And Tony's like, so, we have signs, and I like to call things. Rickey's like, whatever you want, coach, whatever you want. He goes, okay, so he goes over the signs. He goes this, and he goes, if you see this, that means we're taking off the sign. So don't worry about the sign if you see this. Got it. So Rickey gets the first base. Guy goes through the whole thing, gives him the takeoff sign. Rickey steals second base. Tony's like, what? Rickey leads off, same thing, gets the sign. Rickey takes off again, steals third. Tony doesn't understand what's happening. Rickey gets back to the dugout, and Tony's like, fiery Tony. He's got his eyes. He's like, well, what happened? He goes, you gave me the takeoff sign. Rickey, take off. And Tony just looks at him and walks, I guess so.
Rickey Henderson stories, so many of them. I'm going to go back to this clip. I think, again, this is the timing of how it all came together. The fact that Monday Night Baseball just happened to be broadcasting an Oakland A's game there against the Toronto Blue Jays there in 1989. Now, the A's and Blue Jays were two very good teams, so it's not like a total shock there. I've always loved Gary Thorne's voice. I feel like Gary just has just a big-time voice. He really understands the moment. He's working with Joe Morgan there. Joe Morgan knows the Bay Area, right? He's from Oakland as well. He knows Rickey personally. And the number of times where just like forces come together that allows a really good broadcasting team to happen to be working at a moment, I think is one of these moments. And I'm glad that it was Gary Thorne and Joe Morgan for this moment, because it really was a special day to be back at the Coliseum. I was there that day with my dad, and there was just a feeling that there was no way the A's can be stopped. There is just no way the A's can possibly be stopped, because they've got Rickey Henderson and they had the best team. And last year was a fluke, Eckersley, Gibson, home run. There's just no way they can be stopped now.
Love that Henderson's going to score another run. He says it as Rickey's on his way around the bases. And then that leads into the great Rickey's home in more ways than one, which he recognizes right in the moment, and then Gary seizes on that. But that tour around the bases about Henderson's going to score another run, all of this has such great understanding for what is happening here and the bigger picture.
Dave, by the way, are they already like tearing down the Coliseum? I'm hearing a bunch of pounding that's going on in the background. Are they already like tearing it down?
No, but the grounds crew is getting the game ready. Clay Wood and his crew are out. I think the pounding you're hearing is over at on the bullpen mounds, or making sure the rubbers are okay.
I just want to make sure that you're safe and that they're not tearing down the Coliseum as we record this episode.
Not yet. It's nice, though. It's nice and quiet right now. And all that's happening is the Holy Toledo sign in center field is flashing almost like a sign. So it's kind of cool to see.
Great. Let's stay in 1989. We talked about the lineup. Josh, how about Dave Stewart?
Yeah, let's go to game one of the 1989 World Series.
Game winner. 21-9 during the regular season, 69 walks and 155 strikeouts. Here's the 1-2 to Mitchell, hit to the right side, and short hop nicely by Phillips to throw him out. And down he goes here. So Stewart has his first strikeout.
3 straight years with 20 wins or more.
And down goes Maldonado.
You will have a good, healthy swing.
Runner goes, and Thompson has gone on strikes. That's grounded toward the hole, and Weiss is there to plug it up and get him at second on the fourth.
The World Series has been played here, and the former, and who knows, maybe future home of the Raiders.
Grounded to short, Weiss on the run, throws it out, an easy inning. And Mitchell gone on strikes. Number 4 for Dave Stewart.
Low-scoring ball game. It's the only game they won 2-1 when McGuire hit the home run.
Game 3, Steinbach comes all the way back and has room. Crowd chanting, "Stew, stew, stew," as Thompson grounds one on a hop to Lansford. Over to second to Phillips, and the Giants finished in the 8th. And Williams gone on strike. He lived up to his old nickname there. And it's grounded to third, backhanded by Phillips, straightens up, and Stewart has his shutout.
Okay, so that is Al Michaels doing play-by-play. We heard Tim McCarver. We also heard a little bit of Jim Palmer, who was part of the announcing crew for 1989. And a couple of things. First of all, Al Michaels, most people forget how good he was at baseball because so much of us just think of him as doing football. I thought that Al was phenomenal at baseball, and I'm really glad we got to hear a montage of all the different things that he said. Even just like a little phrase that I wrote down that I want to steal. He said, "Ground ball in the hole, Weiss plugs it up." I think it's just a great little expression, right? Because a lot of us use the phrase, ground ball in the hole. Weiss plugs it up. I think it's just a really neat expression.
So for me, I remember being in the crowd, and Josh mentioned 88, and obviously that pain was still with most of the fans as we go into the ballpark. Because 88, they struggled so much against the Dodgers. Aside from the Canseco Grand Slam and the McGuire walk-off, there was nothing to talk about. Offensively, they struggled. They could not get a key hit. So I remember here it is, game 1, World Series, back again, the dreaded Giants. All right, for me, I have irrational hate for the Giants. I've had irrational hate for the Giants since I was 3 years old. I couldn't even fathom losing to these guys. And so the A's got the lead on a Tony Phillips RBI base hit. And it was like the skies open. We got a key hit in the World Series. We have the lead. It was just like this. Oh, it changed everything. And then Stu on the mound, and Stu wasn't going to let him lose. I mean, this is a World Series where the Giants never had the lead once in the 4 games. Forget about the earthquake and what the A's were going to steamroll the Giants. They steamrolled the Giants in the spring training. They destroyed them in spring training. It was just they were not going to lose to the Giants. But that feeling in that ballpark, there was such tension until Phillips got that hit. And then, Dave Parker gets the big double. everything changes at that point. But just the relief to finally have the lead and have a World Series go-ahead hit was huge.
Love the reference to Dave Stewart's old nickname, Smoke, that Al Michaels just subtly drops in there.
You know, it's interesting about Stu too, because Stu was a fastball, forkball pitcher. And you look at guys today who use the splitter or the forkball as their strikeout pitch. Stu, fastball was his strikeout pitch. He actually used his forkball to set up his fastball, which is totally backwards to how pitchers pitch now. But that was Stu. Stu was, if I'm going to beat you, I'm going to beat you with the heat.
So my biggest memories of 1989 World Series was that entire season, just the immense pride that the Bay Area felt, right? The A's and the Giants were just at the top of baseball the entire season. And the whole year was like, would there really be a World Series where the A's and the Giants are both in it? I remember there was some year in the mid-'80s where it was like 2 weeks into the season and the A's and the Giants are both in first place. And my dad cut out the standings and put it on the refrigerator. And it stayed there for like 3 or 4 years because it just never happened. The two teams were never, ever good at the same time. But this year they were great. And they both win in the championship series. They meet in the World Series because both won pretty quickly in their championship series. The A's won in 4. The A's won in 5. The Giants won in 5. There was like 2 or 3 days of buildup. And so it's just this great feeling of pride. And I've always contended, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, that this is when you really had to make a decision if you were an A's fan or a Giants fan. Because so much of it back then was, no, you rooted for both. There was no interleague play. Everyone except for David Feldman, wanted both teams to be successful. And so a big storyline was, okay, now you really do have to decide. And I remember that's when it was like, yes, I have decided that I want the Oakland A's to win. And I just thought there was just no way that the Giants could possibly touch them. But that was my feeling. It's just the immense pride. And then the other thing was, yeah, you want to go to the games of the Coliseum because this is the nice place. Like, again, look over my shoulder there, right? Like, this is the nice place. It's warm. You can take BART to get there. There's open seating. And then you have to go to Candlestick, and it's a pain to get there. And the parking lot is always flooded, and it's cold as can be. And the food is terrible there. Like, the Coliseum was the place to be. And to me, like, Game 1, Game 2 of 1989 represents like the peak Coliseum for me, because it's before it got ruined by Mount Davis. It's before the earthquake, and the A's are just on top of the world for Games 1 and Games 2.
Let me criticize Al Michaels. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for me, 1989, my dad and all of his brothers grew up in New York. They're all Giants fans. So I'm growing up in Maryland. We're all rooting for the Giants. I'm recording every single one of these games on VHS, and I still have 1989 Game 4 of the World Series because I use the same tape, and we recorded over it each time. And Game 4 never got recorded over, so I've still watched that over and over again. Al, with the way that he calls the final out, there's nothing big. There's nothing gigantic. It's great the whole way through. But by the final out, it almost seems like this is a foregone conclusion. Dave Stewart is going to throw a complete game. So Al keeps it straight. Meanwhile, the fans' excitement behind them, you can hear it. And you can hear exactly what each of you is talking about, just how important this Game 1 win was for the A's.
You know, my favorite story for the 89 World Series, and I've told Josh this, it didn't happen here at the Coliseum, it happened in Candlestick, but it was after the Game 4. And I was lucky enough to find my way into the locker room at Candlestick, and there's celebrations going on. And Michael Zagaris, the A's team photographer, wants to take a picture of Dave Stewart, Bob Welch, Storm Davis, and Mike Moore, the A's starting pitchers. And so he gets them all around. And he's about to take the picture, and Stu says, stop. Because we're a 5-man starting staff. Where's Kurt Young? And he went around to find Kurt Young, make sure Kurt was part of this picture. And it's just, that has always stood with me. And that picture still hangs in the A's clubhouse now. That was the leader that Stu was. No man left behind. And it was a small gesture, but it just hold weight. It is what Dave Stewart was all about. And to be able to see that in person, of all that stuff in the World Series and the earthquakes and these crazy plays, that moment to me was what Dave Stewart and the A's were all about.
Okay, so at one point during that montage that we heard, Michaels, that's a bad step. Al Michaels references the former home of the Raiders and perhaps the future home of the Raiders. Remember, this was 1989. This was still a long time before the Raiders returned to Oakland. So what we're going to do next is there is a fan that happened to bring a camcorder to a day game in 1996 when Mount Davis was under construction. And I'm going to play it. He mostly is taking video of his kid eating hot dogs and being a kid. But there's also some great footage of Mount Davis under construction. And I basically just want Dave to kind of talk us through like what it was like in 1996 as I pull up this clip here. Hold on. Okay, so the video is a little bit shaky here because it's someone with a camcorder. But again, he's standing in right field. He is showing the cranes. He is showing Mountain Davis that is under construction here. There's a flag that's up there. Oh, by the way, there's a game that's going on as this is taking place. And so, Dave, you were there. Tell us more about what it was like in 1996.
Yeah, it was crazy. So this is like a whole new era in A's baseball. Walter Haas had passed away. They had sold the team. The Raiders are moving back, and now Mount Davis is being built in front of our eyes during the games. The A's had opened that season in Las Vegas because the stadium was still under construction and wasn't playable for the first week. So we arrive at this, basically 3 weeks into the season. We show up and we see the construction, and the bleachers are gone, and we're all sad, and we kind of see what they're building. Like, okay, and we go on a road trip. We come back, and now it's a little higher. Go on a road trip. Okay, now as you see there, it's just about at the third deck level, right? That section there. We're like, okay, well, that's not so bad. We can still sort of see the hills. It's not horrible. And then we go on an next road trip, and we come back, and now it's up above the third deck. And there's another. I'm like, how high are they going? Oh my God! And yeah, it's Mount Davis. And so, we'd be playing these games, and the construction, especially on weekday afternoon games, the construction's going on during the game. As you mentioned the pounding you heard just minutes ago, that was the whole game. There's pounding going on. Construction workers are up there working. It turned into a thing where they would dance to YMCA during the seventh inning stretch because the construction workers had the hats on and I'll be doing the dances. But it's going on during the game. It is unbelievable to think about that we had a whole season like this. In 96, the A's weren't great, but they hit a lot of home runs. They hit a ton. They set the A's record at the time for home runs in a season. McGuire's hitting that. I still remember McGuire hitting a home run off Earl Hershiser. Yeah, 8 years too late. But he had a home run off Hershiser into the construction instead center field. I mean, it was unbelievable. And you look at this video now, and this is what it was like. You're playing games where this construction's going on, and it kept getting higher and higher. And it was just the most absurd thing.
I hope that we're all not getting too dizzy with the camera. I love that we have it. There's very few, images that even survive, even though 1996 was not that long ago. Jesse, again, as you watch this video, I don't know if this is the first time you've watched this video, Jesse. Like, what goes through your mind as you're looking at all this?
This is the first time for me watching it, and so it's fascinating to see everything in progress. This is a snapshot in time. It's the time capsule. It's interesting to see, and just to hear from Dave how this 1996 season was. Here's everything right in the thick of things. It's just unbelievable to me.
Dave, so I was in college when this was happening, and then I was in my first job with the Watertown Indians. What was the sense of, is this going to ruin the Coliseum? During the season, was it, you mentioned how much higher are they continuing to go? Was there this immediate dread that the Coliseum is being ruined, or was it just like, oh yeah, it's still the multi-team era where you play baseball and football in the same place and this is necessary?
Definite dread. When the bleachers were gone, the bleachers was such a hallmark of the Coliseum, and especially the baseball part of the Coliseum, the communities that grew out there. When those were gone, that was, you said, oh no, we just lost a huge faction of our fan base who loved to sit out there and be part of that community is gone. And then as you saw this thing, Banjo Man's still happy. There's one happy guy. But that's because he's got $1 million. So he sold that propeller thing for a patent on the propeller hat. Unreal. But you just saw It's a true story.
Jesse's
Jesse.
losing his mind. You need to
It's a true
explain
story.
more.
Yeah, that's Stacy. He was a Berkeley hippie who had literally patented the propeller hat for over $1 million at the time. Yeah, he's still out here. We still see him out here. He knows one song in the banjo. He's played the same song for 40 years.
What song is it?
Oh, who knows? I have no idea. Pretty much, let's go Ace.
Number one. That's what he would say.
But the dread that the Coliseum was ruined. It really was. And, when we came back by the end of 96 and most of Mount Davis was done, because it had to be done for the Raider season in September. They had sold their luxury boxes and stuff. So we got a real good see of how high it was. And it just wasn't a ballpark anymore. It was a stadium. And it wasn't a stadium conducive for baseball. It's just sad. It was really – and it made me – I grew up a Raider fan. When they first moved to LA, it wasn't that different for me because I never went to Raider games, so seeing them on TV was sort of the same. But what they did to the stadium made me hate the Raiders, just a little bit lower than my hate for the Giants.
All right, so
wait,
now
hold on.
Go ahead.
Because I see myself, I'm probably the same age as that kid in that video.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to me that now the way that I perceive Mount Davis is every single team and broadcaster that is coming through for their final trip to the Coliseum, everyone is doing the trip up Mount Davis one last time. And so the notion of what Mount Davis means, it feels like has changed over time.
Well, it's just part of the stadium now, right? So, and you say that Vince Cotroneo and myself, last homestand, we went up to the top of Mount Davis. You had to go see it. We've seen most of the teams do it. What's funny is, as you saw the construction going on, the California Angels at the time, they have a bunch of their bats buried in Mount Davis. Rex Hudler, JT Snow, I can't remember the other guys. It might have been Tim Salmon. They took their bats and they had them put into the concrete into Mount Davis. So, yeah, it is. I mean, it's been around for a long time now, right? Since 96. So it is part of what a lot of people think of the stadium. They don't know it as any differently. So it is an iconic part of the Coliseum.
So I'm again going to move my head out of the way here so we can see a little bit more. And you can see how it's tarped off. Initially, it was not tarped off. And there was actually times in the early 2000s when the A's were in the postseason, you would sell tickets for that thing, especially when the A's and Giants would play their interleague regular season games. And it wasn't every single seat, but it was darn close. And the top of Mount Davis would be packed, and that place would be extremely loud. And then the A's got to a certain point, and they just realized that it was just better just to tarp it off and not even bother trying to sell tickets up there and deal with concessions and bathrooms and all those things.
Yeah, it's become, the Raiders ended up tarping it off too. Mm-hmm. They weren't selling tickets. And that was the thing that really pisses a lot of people off. So we built this for you, and now you're tarping come on now. You ruined the stadium. You don't even need it. But yes, for those games when it was open, and you talk about an A's Giant game, I think the 99, this is Olmedo Signs hitting a big run against Rob Nen, a walk-off home run. This place had 55,000 people. It was jumping. There's nothing like it.
All right, let's skip ahead to 2002, which was an extremely special year for the Oakland A's until it wasn't. But we're going to start with the times when it was really special. So this is the year of the winning streak, the 20 in a row. And we're going to watch clips from 18, 19, and 20 that were all dramatic fashion. But I think the part that might be forgotten is that one of the storylines as this streak was happening was, oh, by the way, there is a player strike that might happen here. And so the A's had won 15 consecutive games. There was an off day, and the next day was the date of the player strike in the middle of the season. Remember, 1994, the season ended. There was no World Series in August. And now here we go. Once again, it was on August 30th was the strike date. The A's had won 15 in a row. And so the backdrop was the A's are having this incredible season again. They had just been – they're finally good again, right? They lose in heartbreaking fashion to the Yankees in back-to-back years when they had chances to close them out. Now the A's are once again great again. And now is a strike going to ruin this? And then as it turns out, there is no strike. The season continues. And so now the A's restart their streak. And it's 15 in a row. It's 16 in a row. It's 17 in a row. During this time, Bill King had decided that this was the week that he was going to take off. And so Ken Korak was the lead announcer for most of this streak. But we're going to start with 18 in a row with Greg Papa on the mic.
Next running. for Ramon Hernandez. He would tie the game. Durham at first, the winning run. Tejada to left field. Well struck. Miguel Tejada has done it. Miguel Tejada has hit a 3-run walk-off homer to win the game. 18 in a row. The celebration just moved about 15 feet towards the Twin dugout.
Dave, where were you for that? Your other memories of 18 in a row?
So I was in the broadcast booth doing stats for Greg Papa, stats and graphics on TV. And the thing about this game that gets lost is Mulder started this game and is dealing. And it actually has a 3-1 lead going in the 9th inning and gives up back-to-back home runs. And then Billy Koch comes in, and he gives up a home run, and now the A's are trailing. And you're like, oh, my God, the streak's going to end this way. And then the A's rally against Eddie Guardado, Everyday Eddie, who's always been tough. And this is Tejada. This is the MVP year. And for Tejada to hit it out like that, and you heard Ray Fosse. And Ray can't help himself when these plays happen. He's just gonna talk over the play-by-play guy. But it's just this pure emotion because you had to laugh. You're like, oh my God, this just happened? 18 in a row. And I thought Greg's call was great, and he laid out. He let the crowd just carry it, and then he comes in and tags it at the end. And it's just these were magical moments. And 18. Yeah, you talked about the possibility of the strike. They had won 15 in a row. They won their 15th in Kansas City, and they got the last out. That was the A's record for longest winning streak at 15. The last out was Eric Burns caught it, and then he threw the ball into the stands. And we're in the clubhouse after the game, and we're like, Eric, where's the ball? Because that's an A's record. Oh man, it's just things that were going on that year. Everybody's mind, but that Coliseum and Miguel Tejada, unreal.
One thing that I really like about that call from Greg, as I dance to the music in the background behind you, Dave, it's such a challenge for a broadcaster to not get too hot on a walk-off, especially to not get too hot too fast. And Greg does such a great job of building, right? He doesn't even hit his limit on Miguel Tejada has done it. It's such well struck. Miguel Tejada has done it. And then Miguel Tejada, he goes right into walk off the run homer, A's win. And then the layout. It's such a beautiful job of building an emotion and never losing control. It's really a lovely call.
Yeah, Greg was such a tremendous television baseball announcer. He worked the medium, in my opinion, as good as anybody ever has, as far as using graphics and videos and moving from place to place. And then his big calls are just terrific. And I talked to Josh about this a little bit earlier. Like, a lot of announcers have a home run call, right? How they tag a tell it goodbye or whatnot. Greg never did. He tried to do it once, and he tried to do over and out, and it just sounded ridiculous and made it like 2 home runs. So it was always natural for him. And Tejada, and then tagging this with 18 in a row and just letting it go. It's beautiful.
Well, the streak was not over, so let's get to the next night.
5 infielders, 1 out, 9th inning, and a 6-6 tie. Grimsley ready. He deals. And it's a line drive, base hit center field. Greg Myers scores from third. Tejada wins another ball game. 19 straight for the Athletics. They've tied the all-time American League record. The 1906 White Sox, the 1947 New York Yankees have company. And if that isn't another MVP statement by Miguel Tejada, I don't know what is. He is amazing. The A's are amazing.
And Ken Korach's voice is amazing, and his call is amazing.
And Ken has the ability, and I've talked to a lot of young announcers about this, on the big calls, don't go up, go down. go down. And that's what Ken does as well as anyone. It's up the middle. He's so good. And now this game, this is a Monday. This is Labor Day. We just had this dramatic over the weekend with the Twins and Tejada. We come back for an afternoon game on a Monday. So everybody's rhythm, it's baseball rhythm, right? It's a little off. Third straight, day game. The A's trail 5-0. Royals take a 5-0 lead in this game. The A's are dead. And Renelvis Hernandez, the pitcher for the Royals, throws a ball right at Jermaine Dye's head. Jermaine backs out of the way and looked at him, and the A's bench just woke up. Jermaine singles. David Justice hits a 2-run homer. Now it's on. You let sleeping dogs lie. You heard that? And that's what Renelvis Hernandez failed to do. And then for Tejada to come up, Royals have taken the lead. The A's tied it up. Tejada, this is Jason Grimsley. We're going to hear about him a little later. Once again, Tejada coming through, and then Korak with the call, tagging it not only with the 19 games and the history of 19 games. Here's your MVP. Beautiful.
Yes, that's what struck me is that there's a couple of different things that Kenny hits on all at once here. It's the winning streak. It's that Miguel Tejada's come through. It's another walk-off. Here's the history of the winning streak with regards to the American League. Here's Miguel Tejada making his case for MVP. Tejada's amazing. The A's are amazing. It's really a beautiful job of he weaves it all together in one moment where emotion is overtaking everyone.
That's a great way to put it. Why emotion is taking places going off the hook, and Ken keeps his mind and his thoughts all in order and lays it out in such a beautiful way. It's a reason why he gets nominated for the Ford Frick Award, right? And someday he's going to be there because he's a Hall of Fame announcer.
So again, the reason why Ken Korak was on the call was because Bill King was taking his time off. And if I remember correctly, there was even talk about, hey, do we need to get Bill King out of his vacation? But Bill said, no, I'm not coming out of vacation.
Well, Bill had no phone. There was no way to call him. So he was on a boat somewhere. He was fine.
So now it's 19 in a row, and then we get to 20, and Bill King is back on the mic for, in my mind, the most iconic moment of the Oakland A's at the Coliseum.
Now the pitch. Swung on. There's a high drive. Hit way back. Right center field. That one is gone. And it's 20 consecutive victories for the Oakland Athletics on an unbelievable night when they lost an 11-0 lead. And now they win it. Hedberg is mobbed at home plate. The crowd comes back to insane life. Crazy. Just plain crazy. How do you explain it? In 103 years of American League Baseball, the Athletics have accomplished what no one has before. They have won 20 consecutive games.
Crazy. Just plain crazy.
It's such a big movie moment. They made a movie about it. That's how you know that is big. This is Bill King. And now, again, think about this. Bill King's signature call is Holy Toledo. What did you not hear during that call? You didn't hear Holy Toledo. Because Bill's in the moment. Nothing's planned. Nothing is in his, it's nothing scripted. He doesn't script his ad-libs. He's calling off emotion. And he calls it as he sees it. And he sticks it. He sticks with the American League record. And then crazy, just plain crazy is how he tagged it. And that night was 11-run lead, Tim Hudson on the mound. He's won 19 in a row, 55,000 people. It's a party. All the September call-ups are in the dugout. Once we used to have September call-ups, they all thought they were going to get in the game. They thought they were going to get to play in the 20th straight win. And Royals come back. Jeff Tam gives a 3-run homer to Sweeney. And here we are, and just capturing everything about it. Not only do they make a movie about this game and this streak, Bill King also has a bottle cap that they make of his call. So when you would pop a top off a bottle, Bill King's call would come on crazy, just plain crazy.
What's funny, though, is that's not my chief takeaway of my favorite thing that he says in this call. And let's set aside the history because that means a lot to me. It's how do you explain it? You can't. That is such a great, honest observation about all of this, that he goes right into the story of the game, that they lost an 11-run lead and they still won, and it's 20 straight. How do you explain it?
Bill, I grew up listening to Bill King, and then to get to know him later, and see how hard he worked. And he taught us a lot about you can work hard at your sport and at your craft, but you need other interests. You need to be interested in other things, and that's going to give you this whole worldview, as you call things, and be able to put things in better perspective. It's not always baseball-centric or football-centric. And I think Bill's the way he lived his life informed the way he called games. And he was such a fan of the English language. And words were very important to him. And I think that all comes across in all his calls, how he's able to use the language to not only paint a picture, but to describe the emotions that's happening at that time.
All right, since we're on a Bill King roll here, let's give another one of my favorite Bill King calls. We're going to go now to 2003 A's Red Sox playoffs.
Blocked at third by Chavez. And a bunt, third base side. Miller charging, barehand picks up, can't make a play. A's win. Ramon Hernandez surprises the Red Sox. He drops down a bunt on the second pitch, and Miller can make no play. The A's have won the game.
And look at him get Raymond in the outfield and right field.
Hernandez ran through first base on the right field line. The team has bogged him in the grass in shallow right field. Holy Toledo, the element of surprise reigns supreme. And they're all standing and admiring and applauding. Hudson and Martinez are not involved in the final. It's a Ramon Hernandez surprise special with the bases loaded and a one-strike count. A quickly dropped bunt, perfectly placed toward third base, allowing Chavez to score the winning run. And the final score in the first game of the ALDS, in 12, the A's 5, the Red Sox 4.
Maybe the biggest surprise bunt since Jake Taylor for the Cleveland Indians.
Yeah.
Again, A's are back in the playoffs again, our fourth year in a row. We lost in 2000, 2001 to the Yankees, lost in 2002 in the Twins. They're back. Game one, Hudson, Pedro. There was a flyover before the game. Hudson always wanted a flyover. He always wanted one. And he finally gets a flyover, and this thing buzzed the Coliseum. It was low. And it shook this whole building. And then you have this great game. The A's trailed in the ninth. Arubio Durazo got a game-tying hit. You go to the 12th. In the 11th inning, or top of the 12th, Chavez makes a great play at third to turn a double play. Rich Harden getting out of a jam. And then the A's rallying, and then out of nowhere, a team that despises the bunt, right? This was the Moneyball A's. They don't bunt. Now, obviously not a sacrifice situation, but they don't bunt. They don't practice it. It's not a thing they do. They win the game on a bunt, and Bill King tags it with the element of surprise reigns supreme.
Other thoughts, Jesse?
How long Bill waits before he gives the final score. I think that it's so tempting for a broadcaster to rush into the final, to rush into saying, here's the score, here's the final. And there's no rush there. And I think part of that is that Bill is dealing with his own surprise, that he's so crystal clear with words in a moment that shocks everyone, right? And a bunt, third base side, it's right into the player and the run scoring, and it's a win. And now he's fighting to find his own language to describe this moment that has delivered the victory. And he is going to get right into it and tell you all about it. It's a Ramon Hernandez surprise special. And then when he's ready to sum it all up, that's when he gives you the final score. I love that. Like, let's talk about this moment. Let's talk about this game. Here's the final now that we're all ready for it. I love that there's no rush to that.
Yeah, Jesse, there's a part where Bill does say the A's have won the game.
Yes.
And I have heard Bill say the Raiders have won the game with these dramatic, crazy endings that they had in their history. The Raiders have won the game. The A's have won the game. And there's just something comforting about that where you're describing all of these things, and then you just say, the A's have won the game. And then you continue to describe the scene, and then you get to the score at the end. But there's something about that. The A's have won the game.
I mean, that's what matters. So you deliver what matters, all the while that Bill doesn't fight against the crowd sound, right? His voice rides atop of it. And that's what we go back to, going back to 1972 and 73, all the way through all of this. What every single one of these highlights has in common is the atmosphere, the excitement is palpable, and Bill adds to it, and it's marvelous.
It's you blend in with the crowd, right? But you still rise above it enough that you know that you're getting it in, but you can still hear everything behind you. And the A's radio audio engineer Michael Baird, who's been here forever, one of the best, and he understands how to mic this stadium. And it's a gift, and the A's have been lucky to have them. And when you listen to these highlights and you listen how everything mixes so well, it's a lot of credit to Michael Baird.
All right, we're going to get to the next clip. But before we get to this next clip, David, I want you to kind of explain. Okay, so that was 2003, and Bill passes away a couple of years later. He went in for hip surgery, and he didn't come out. Vince Cotroneo is hired as the next A's broadcaster. Ken Korak gets elevated from the number 2 spot to the number 1 spot. And we're going to get to a clip from 2006 with Vince. But I want to get your perspective on just that time for the A's and their fans and the broadcasting crew, and just sort of like how challenging it is when someone as beloved as Bill, for his on-air work, for his off-air persona, passes away, and now there's a changing of the guard with the A's broadcast booth.
Yeah, you never want to be the guy who replaces the guy, right? We've heard that saying in the broadcast world forever. Don't be the guy to replace the guy. You want to be the guy who replaces the guy. So Vince comes in. Now, luckily, Vince isn't hired as a number 1. He's, like you said, Ken Korak moved to that number 1 position. So Vince is number 2. And Vince is a pro. He's been with the Astros. He's been with the Rangers. But an unknown quantity to Bay Area listeners. And at this point in the mid-2000s, radio baseball is still a thing. Not every game is televised. So people are still listening on the radio. It's still part of their daily habit. It's a tough place to play. Vince is a pro, and he steps in. But the specter of Bill King, it's still above you. It's still there. But Vince handled it very well. This is a 2016. It's a little different, right? Hudson and Mulder are no longer there. 2005, 2006, the A's came close, but they didn't make the playoffs. Or 2004, 2005, 2006, there's expectation, but you don't really know. But Frank Thomas comes along. Frank Thomas, who has a terrible first April. It looks like he's done. The A's go back to Chicago the first week of May. It's 2 homers in his return to Chicago, and that's it. Turn on the lights because Frank's a Hall of Famer. And through that year, Frank did Hall of Fame things. You're down by a run in the 8th with a runner on. Frank hits a 2-run homer, and that ball game is over. That was what was special about that 06 team. Is really it was Frank Thomas, it was Nick Swisher, Milton Bradley. Eric Chavez is still there. Houston Street is closing games, and now we're back in the playoffs. And going to the last day of the season. You didn't know who you were going to play in the playoffs. You were either going to play Minnesota or Detroit. And no one wanted to play Minnesota because they had Johan Santana, the best pitcher in the game, and he was going to go game 1. And if not that, he was going to go game 5. And we were losing game 5 all the time. But Frank, doing Hall of Famer things, homers against Santana in the 2nd inning in the first game. And again, boom, the A's win that. Barry Zito, they win game 2. Mark Kotze hits an inside-the-park home run. And now they're coming back to Oakland for game 3. We've been up 2-0 in series before. In 2001, we were up 2-0. In 2003, we were up 2-0. So nothing's guaranteed. but you feel pretty good going into Game 3 against the Twins, and it all culminated with what you're going to show now.
Bases loaded, 1-2 to Scudero. Righty versus righty. Crane's pitch. Line down the right field side by Kadire. Fair ball in the corner. He's going to clear the bases. Chavez has scored. Peyton has scored. Here comes Swisher. Here's the throw. He's saved. He's saved. Marco Scudero. A bases clearing double. It's 8-2 Oakland. Pandemonium at the Coliseum. Marco Scudero drives in 3. Hit a hanging slider from Jesse Crane and just powered it toward the right field corner. A helpless feeling certainly for Michael Kadire and especially for Ron Gardenhire. That might be the hit of the series.
I was really happy for Vince. He had the call for Mark Kotze's inside the park home run in Game 2. That was his inning. He had the call there. And I think that because Vince was able to rise to the moment in those 2 big moments, I think that was the time when the A's fans realized we've got a good one. We've got a really good one here at Vince.
Yeah. Vince is not a huge fan of that call. And
really?
We talked about earlier, because we talked about earlier how Korach goes down when it comes exciting. Vince kind of went up, and he kind of went, as he says, he goes, ah! He wished that he had kept it in control more. He thought he lost a little bit of control. But it kind of met the moment, right? If you're an A's fan and you've been waiting for this big hit, I think every A's fan felt exactly what Vince felt as Scudero cleared the bases.
Yeah, my one critique would be something that I'm trying really hard to get out of the habit of doing, and that's the phrase, it's going to. So he says he's going to clear the bases. But as it turns out, we don't know for sure, right? And so it's really hard in the moment to try to make sure that you say like the exact precise words. The third runner is really close to the plate. So he kind of got away with it. But I know that phrase, he's going to, is really easy to come out of our mouths. And I think that's an example of where you got to be careful with. As it turns out, I still think his call is great. That's what we do on Crafting the Call. We nitpick to try to get to learn from others so that we can try to be ready in these big moments if we get there.
I want to go back to what you said, Dave, about Vince, because I think that there's such a difference in the way that broadcasters break ourselves down and the way that fans perceive us and enjoy us. The honesty of the moment. It's so easy for me to understand why an A's fan would listen to that and love it, because they're feeling the exact same thing, exactly as you said, Josh. So yes, Vince, of course, get bigger, get deeper, etc. But it's so big. And he declares, could this be the hit of the series? Quick poll of the two of you gentlemen. Was that the hit of the series?
Well, for me, Frank Thomas's home run against Santana was a hit of the series, but this was definitely the clincher.
It was the final nail in the coffin. For me, it was the Kotze inside the park home run. Because that made it up 2-0, and you're going back to Oakland. To me, it was Kotze's inside the park. This was the final nail in the coffin, which you need. Someone has to do it. But
you can see, and Josh, I'm going to bring this back to you. You can see how Vince lost control because he saw the future. Mm-hmm. When he says it's going to clear the bases, he's seeing something that hasn't happened yet. He's already thinking this is going to be a 3-run double. And now we've got trouble because we've got to play at the plate for the third run, which that elevates things even more, that it's not an easy 3-run double.
I can tell you this. So in 2006, by this point, I'm now covering the Oakland A's for the Oakland Tribune. This is my third year on the beat. And put it this way, that's when I said, okay, I can write my first paragraph. Right. Because, you're writing copy as the game goes along. You're writing the middle, you're writing the bottom, you're writing your notes, you're maybe thinking about some transitions. When Scudero hit that double, that's when I thought, all right, Josh, your words better be correct. You better get the lead right here because the A's have finally won a playoff series. They're going on to the next round. All right. We have two more.
The next round.
Yeah. All right. So we have two more clips before we end this episode. We're going to skip ahead next to 2010. And another just special magical moment that happens in baseball, and you never know when it's going to happen. It's not a playoff game, but when it does, make sure you get the call right.
Ninth inning. Bartlett's on deck, and Braden turns. He throws, and it's swung on a ground ball to short. Taken there. Pennington's got it. He throws a perfect game. Dallas Braden has thrown a perfect game. The A's have beaten Tampa Bay 4-0. The kid from Stockton has done it for the A's.
The kid from Stockton has done it for the A's. It's so interesting to see a clean-shaven Dallas Braden throwing the perfect game. It's on Mother's Day. His grandmother was in the crowd. An emotional moment with him and her. If I remember correctly, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she was sitting in section 209, which is the area code for Stockton.
So it was the first 209 day that Dallas had bought that section and was going to give to people in Stockton to come sit in the game. So she was still sitting behind, like in the regular family seats. But he had the whole 209 Stockton people there on Mother's Day. And obviously Dallas's mom had passed away when he was younger. He was raised by his grandmother. The hug after the thing, they got his grandmother down on the field, and she hugs her. And as close as I've come to crying at a winning moment, I cried when the Dodgers beat the A's in '88. But for a winning moment, just seeing that emotion. And then for me personally, I thought of my dad. My dad was at the game. In 1990, Brian Holman of the Mariners retired the first 26 A's. And then Ken Phelps pinch hit and hit a home run to break up the perfect game. And my dad said, "I'll never see a perfect game." And I remember this. He was like, "I'll never see one. I'll never see one." And Dallas Braden threw this perfect game. And the first thing I did is ran up to my dad and just said, "You saw one. You saw one." And that was what that thing, and Dallas talks about it now too, is what it means to everybody else. I mean, Dallas was very proud, obviously, through perfect games, 23 perfect games in Major League history. He's thrown one of them. But he is so touched by what it means for everybody else. And I think that's what that moment in baseball is about. It wasn't a big crowd at the Coliseum that day. It was 12,000 people. But everybody has that story of that perfect game and that moment on Mother's Day and the hug. Korak had to put it into words there at the end, something that doesn't happen very often, and he nails it. Braden, just a few weeks earlier was in the news for the "get off my mound" when he yelled at A-Rod. So he's kind of in the zeitgeist at the time, right? And then this happens. It's everything happening at once. It's incredible to think about.
When Mike Morin has his no-hitter earlier that we listened to, it's mentioned his hometown. And I love that we get right into the kid from Stockton. Mm-hmm. Ken Korak is right on this, right? The grounder to short, Pennington. And then we're going to get to the fact that the A's won the game, but it's a perfect game. And then he personalizes it. It's such a personal call from Ken.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is Ken Korak, who grew up in Southern California, listened to Vince Scully. And one of the most iconic calls of a perfect game is Vince Scully calling Sandy Koufax's perfect game. It's actually written in transcript form in baseball books. It's lyrical. But Vin at the time would say what time it is. It's 9:18 as Sandy Koufax takes them out. It's 9:19 as he looks in. And I was lucky enough to talk to Vin about that. He said he wanted to personalize it. He wanted it so Sandy Koufax knew when he went back and listened or turned it to his kids or his grandkids that this is the time, this was the place. And Korak felt the exact same thing while he was calling Dallas Braden, that he wanted to personalize it. And if you listen earlier in that inning, he is marking the time as things are happening to kind of give it that same Vince Scully feel.
All right, we have one more clip before we end this episode. And I didn't realize this until we were about halfway through, just how many of these moments were day games. And the photo over my shoulder of the Coliseum before and after, day games. I think when you're a kid, most of the time you go to a baseball game, it's a day game, right? Your parents don't want to take you to night games. They want to take you to day games. And so for me, I think some of my best, fondest memories are going to day games at the Oakland Coliseum. And whether it's Scudero in the playoffs, which happened to be a day game, or whether it's a couple of other games that I'll never forget that we did not show, which was when Dave Stewart went 11 innings in a day game and beat Eric Hansen and the Mariners 1-0 in 11 innings. I think about the time that Rickey Henderson scored from second base on a ground ball to the shortstop. And that was a day game, and I was sitting in the Coliseum. There's just something about the Coliseum to me that's just day baseball. And so for our final clip, I'm glad that we will once again have one more day game as we bid farewell to the Coliseum.
Fly ball. Center field. Coco. Ball game. Western Division. The Oakland A's have shocked the Rangers and the baseball world. And they are the AL Western Division Championship. Unbelievable.
Well, we started with a highlight of the A's celebrating on the field and celebration being played in the background. It's only fitting that we end with one as there. Glenn Kuiper on the call there as the A's dethroned the Rangers, who had gone to back-to-back World Series at that point. It was unbelievable that the A's came from nowhere and won the West in 2012.
Yeah, this was a bad team in 2011. Bob Melvin took over. In 2012, I remember we started the year in Japan. We were all in a karaoke room, most of the traveling beat and the broadcasters, and we went around the karaoke room asking, how many wins do we think the A's are going to have? And the prevailing opinion was about 77. You didn't know what you had with Yoenis Cespedes. This was his first year at the A's. Your starting pitchers were Brandon McCarthy and Bartolo Colon, and maybe you're hoping Tommy Malone could get some out. So the year they get hot in June, Brandon Moss comes up, and now they're just trying to get a wild card spot, right? And they get the wild card. They're ending the year on a 3-game series against the Rangers. They win the Monday night game, and they clinch the wild card. They have this rocket celebration, crazy celebration in the clubhouse. They go Tuesday. Travis Blackley takes them out for the A's, Australian left-hander. They win again. Now they're tied for first. Now they're going to the last game against the Rangers. They were down 5 games with 9 games to go. No team has ever done this. They fall behind in this game, and now they start to rally, and it's Hamilton drops the ball. Fly ball to center field. Josh Hamilton drops the ball, runs score. The inning continues, and the A's take off. And if you talk to most current level of A's fans in the last 15, 20 years, this is the game they point to as their favorite Coliseum moment. Maybe they were too young for Hatteberg, obviously too young for the Bash brothers. So this is the moment that they cling on to. And what you didn't see there is Balfour taking the mound to start the night. And the A's television decided to stay because Balfour rage. They play Metallica. The fans in the right field bleachers are going absolutely nuts, banging their head the entire time. It's 2 minutes, and they don't stop. And Balfour did not – he'd already pitched 3 days in a row, and it's a 7-run lead. And Balfour's like, no, I'm going. I'm going on the mound. And that place, TV stayed. Glenn and Ray did not say a word. It was just pictures and sound and capturing the essence of what was happening in this ballpark at the time. And then you saw that last out, and then it's another wild, wild celebration takes place. It really was one of those magical Coliseum things that, from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, and it builds up and it lets out. For me, the wildest celebration I ever saw at the Coliseum was when the A's clinched the West in 2000. It was very similar to 2012. 2000 A's were not expected to do that much. But now it comes down to the wire. They needed to win the last game of the season to avoid a makeup game in Tampa Bay. They win this game. They celebrate in that clubhouse for hours. This is the Jason Giambi, Jason Isringhausen A's. That place, they open the playoffs 2 days later, and it still smells. They have candles lit in the clubhouse to try and get rid of the smells. This 2012 celebration was as close as I've ever seen to that. It was just mayhem.
I love seeing the sprint from all the guys in the dugout across the field. That's the mad.
And it's a long sprint.
Yes. Do you know where I come to as that's the final clip that we're going to watch for this? Is I've settled on, and Josh, you and I, we go, what is our takeaway at the end of each show? It's the relationship between the fans and the team. It's the team and these superstars coming in, or role players or whomever it might be wearing the green and gold, and how they've elevated the play, how a guy steps forward, and how the fans then elevate, and just everyone feeding off of each other throughout these clips. It's been that remarkable relationship and energy between the two parties.
And I think that can't be lost is how organic it is. Where this is not a forced, you love this team because they're in Oakland. This is an organic love that grows. Each different A's team has a different, like we talked about, different deal in the Coliseum, but it grows organically. From the Bash Brothers and those crowds to what we saw with the beginning of Moneyball and the Jason Giambi A's, and then to these early 2012, 2013, 2014 A's, the different fan bases and how they came to love those teams. And the teams themselves, it was passed down. And I've been lucky enough, I've been with this team for over 35 years from the different players. And I saw this culture of the A's clubhouse be passed down from Dave Stewart and Dave Henderson to Mark McGuire, to Jason Giambi, to Eric Chavez, to Miguel Tejada. It just goes on, that how you take care of your teammates and how you take care of the fans who come to the game. It is one big community that has never stopped. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking. It's not the team and the players and the fans. This is another force at work here. Everybody else would like this to say the same because it is so special.
And I think since this is called Crafting the Call, when we listen to these clips from the announcers, that special relationship between the players, the fans, that continues to the announcers, yes. Right? You hear that with Bill King and Ken Korak and Lon Simmons and Monty Moore and Glenn Kuiper, and let's include Ted Robinson and Wayne Hagan. And I'm sure there's many more that I'm forgetting. Vince Cotroneo, Greg Papa. And I think that you can't help it as an announcer to feel that energy, to feel what it means. Yeah, there's been some superstars, Rickey Henderson, Reggie Jackson. The fans loved Marco Scutaro, right? We heard them chanting Marco Scudaro's name. And I think that's all of what sums up the Coliseum. And I'm going to shut up before I start crying.
No, I'm glad Vince Cotroneo losing it brought him into the family, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, because you think about the A's, and we know the players come and go, but the front office and a lot of the employees here have been here forever, especially since 80 with Mickey Morbido, the A's traveling secretary, has been here since 1980. Steve Vucinich, who was the equipment manager who retired a couple years ago, was here from 1968. We have people in the front office. You talk about David Force has been here forever, right? Dan Feinstein has been here forever. There's just been this longevity. Ken Korak, right? It's been here since 1996, right? So you go, Bill King gets hired in 81. He partners with Ken Korak. Ken Korak partners with Vince Cotroneo. That's the line for 40 plus years. There's that, that connection that we've had, and everybody passes down these things. Now, TV's been a little different lately, but for a long time, it was Greg Papa, and then it was Glenn Kuiper. And those were your TV voices, your constant TV voices. And that definitely brings everything together. I think who doesn't get enough credit for the work that he does is Chris Townsend on All Access. He's been here for a long time on A's All Access. And now he is that connectivity for a lot of people, because you've heard him now for so many years, and he does a great job bringing this all in. One of the things that's always saddened me a little bit, besides just the normal sadness of Ray Fosse passing away, is Ray was that connection to the 70s team, right? And we've kind of lost that now. We don't really have someone to connect us to the 70s. And I try and do my best, because I know I was lucky enough to hear most of Ray's stories, and I experienced as a little kid, and I remember some of it, not like Ray, but I was able to pass that along. And, this year the A's have done Alumni Sundays when they brought back alumni, and it was a great idea to bring back former players. And I really appreciate Dallas Braden. Before every time he comes and talks to me, and he says, what should I ask Raleigh Fingers? What should I ask Joe Rudy? And I can tell him that, well, you're going to ask Joe Rudy about Mike Marshall and about not taking a warm-up pitch. And at least we can keep those stories going through the voices that we have. And we've been so lucky to have the voices that we have.
Let me also make sure that I shout out Robert Buon, who was the host of the post-game call-in show. Robert and David worked on that show for a long time, and I think that Robert has also done a fantastic job of preserving a lot of the audio clips of Bill King and Lon Simmons through the years so that they can be put together with the TV calls that we witnessed. And I know that Robert, special guy, immense talent, got out of the world of baseball on a daily basis, still does a lot of different things as well. I want to make sure that he gets a shout out here as we pay tribute to all the different people who've helped make A's broadcasting, radio, TV, online, A's Access what it is.
Yeah, it's been pretty special. I've been so grateful to be a part of it. Like I said, starting as a fan and then being to work with TV and to work with all those announcers that you've talked about. Even Dennis Eckersley filled in and did color for the A's for a while, and getting to know Eck and just, Ron Darling started with us, and now obviously with the Mets, and the people that we've given the opportunities to and have come along. And, you're seeing now with the A's, with Chris Carey, who has a bright future. You're seeing Jenny Cavnar, different voices who are learning the A's history and hopefully will continue to tell the stories of the A's and tell the story of the A's history. That's what you don't want to be lost, right? I always felt when Charlie Finley brought the A's from Kansas City, he didn't want to have anything to do with the Philadelphia A's or the Kansas City A's. There was no connectivity to the A's history. It took the Haas family to bring back the elephant mascot, right? To bring back the history, to honor those teams. And so as this A's team continue, I know there are people who are going to work to keep that legend and the history alive. Keep the A's Hall of Fame alive, even when in this intermitting years in Sacramento, right? Keep the A's Hall of Fame going. It's not an Oakland Hall of Fame, it's an A's Hall of Fame. So hopefully we can keep the history alive.
Final thoughts, Jesse.
Cool in the gang for celebration. There's just that element of cool to the A's when you look back on, we started with the 70s and into the 80s, and we talked about the different reasons that the A's teams became powerhouses and who these players were and what great moments this was. But I come back to us hearing celebration to start off the show. This was really special for me to listen to the two of you sharing these stories and sharing this bond over the A's and the Coliseum.
It's interesting you bring up celebration. Let's bring in another name, Mike Selleck, who's been part of the A's PR staff now for 30 plus years. Had the idea to put the song Celebration in the A's Hall of Fame. And I think it is a brilliant idea because nothing says an A's win like Celebration. I don't think you can ever – I know Josh and I have the same thing. You hear that song, the A's win. You hear Roy Steele. The A's win. And I think putting Celebration in the A's Hall of Fame would be more than appropriate.
For Dave Feldman and for Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, I'm Josh Suchon. Thank you for watching Crafting the Call as we share our memories of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. We'll talk to you again next week.